Spanish is a really popular language to learn, and that's because, well, it's really easy, right?
Perro.
Perra.
Perro. Rápido corren los perros.
Or maybe not. Is Spanish hard to learn? Let's find out.
Entonces, para todos los latinos con amor, les digo de que sigamos promoviendo nuestra cultura de alegría, de gozo, de baile, de sonrisas.
Now this might be obvious, but how hard a foreign language is depends on your mother tongue. If you are Georgian or Chinese, Spanish might be a little bit harder than if you are English, say. Because if you speak English, well, you're going to find all these nice little surprises inside the Spanish language. Little Easter eggs like these 20,000 Spanish words that will seem very familiar to you right out of the gate. On the other hand, if you listen to people speaking Spanish really fast, you would be forgiven for thinking that Spanish is pretty much impossible to learn. But don't confuse speed with complexity. Spanish actually has very easy phonetics. For a start, the sounds in Spanish almost always match the spelling and are similar to how you say them in English. The only letter that's even different from English is the ñ.
¿Te gusta la lasaña?
And also easy is Spanish vowels, which only ever have one sound each. They don't change, which is pretty useful.
A, mala, nada, más. E, come, eso, pena. I, mi, misa, hija. O, oso, algo, tengo. U, un, sus, tus.
But if you want to have passionate outbursts in the street, don't we all, you need to learn some more difficult sounds too. More on that in just a moment. Now, you might have heard that so many languages have these insane rules when it comes to making the plural, even in easier languages like Italian, but that's not so with Spanish. In Spanish, you make the plural in the same way as English by adding an S or an ES to the end of words. One amiga, two amigas. One friend, two friends. A, as. See? Easy. Something else that's easy, by the way, is clicking these three buttons right here, liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications, because if you do, there's a lot more fun coming your way in all kinds of languages.
C, cielo, casa. G, gato, gente. H, hola, almohada. J, punto, cajón. Doble L, llave. Lluvia, ñ, caño, ñomo, mañana. Q, quiero, aquel. R, rato, carro, cara, B, ave, veloz, zeta, zapato, casa.
The harder sounds in Spanish are made with these letters, and they are pretty tricky at first, but once you know how to say them, you can usually make a good guess at how to pronounce most Spanish words. The thing is, Spanish only has 27 alphabet letters, but there are at least 39 different phonetic sounds.
Va, be, bi, bo. Bo.
The letters B and V are pronounced exactly alike in Spanish with a B sound. So you might read voy, but it actually sounds like boy. But here is the curveball. The letters can sound different depending on where they are exactly in the word.
Vasco, blusa, centavos, trabajar, samba, cambiar.
As for how you arrange words in a sentence, well, Spanish is quite similar to English with just a few exceptions. Like in English, we put the adjective before the noun, right? A beautiful night, a black cat. But in Spanish, the other way around, adjective comes after. Un café negro, a coffee black. Un hombre alto, a man tall. So we come after the noun, except when it doesn't, of course, but keep watching. You need to hear all sides of this story.
Oh, just vibrate your tongue. Oh, just put your tongue in this part of your mouth and just vibrate it.
A bit like a lover's quarrel, a lot depends on your outlook. Is it difficult or is it just passionate? The double R or doble R can be challenging for some Spanish learners to pronounce. In fact, when I first learned Spanish, it took me about 2 years, literally 2 years, to be able to roll my R's, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it in a couple of hours. R con R cigarro, R con R barril, rápido ruedan los carros, cargados de azúcar de ferro... del ferrocarril. Easy. Don't worry, most Spanish kids can't actually roll their R's until they are at least 5 or 6. If you love it, you'll learn it eventually, and you'll sound amazing doing it.
Okay.
Now, there are bigger things to worry about, like verb conjugations and prepositions. For one, there is one certain tiny little word that can mean many, many different things.
Ya verás. Ay, cuéntame ya, no puedo esperar. Ya me dieron el trabajo. Ah, ya. Muy bien.
The Spanish word ya depends almost entirely on the context. It could mean now, still, already. It could mean anymore, or even it's about time, or even vague things like, yeah, sure, but that is nothing. Try this on for size. Si hablaras español, te resultaría más fácil trabajar en España. This is the weirdo of Spanish grammar, the infamous subjunctive. The subjunctive is all about imaginary situations, desires, doubts, emotions, the unknown, the abstract. There's no time involved, only the point of view of the speaker. We don't use it that much in spoken English these days, but in Spanish, well, you can't swing a cat without hitting the subjunctive in Spanish. It is everywhere, and I'll be honest, learning it is no joke, but once you know it, I swear you will actually be looking for excuses to use the Spanish subjunctive because it's fun and it makes you feel like a real Spanish native. But like with most tricky grammar in a new language, the best way to get used to any grammar like this, like the subjunctive, is by seeing it used in context, not with rule books, but seeing it in context. And a great way to do that on YouTube is over here on the StoryLearning Spanish YouTube channel.
Isabela controla las flores y las plantas. Bruno, no se habla de Bruno.
So the whole StoryLearning Spanish channel is about learning Spanish through stories, and there's content for beginners, intermediate, and advanced, and you can even get free transcripts as well, so it's perfect for learning Spanish grammar in a more natural way, whilst also improving your listening skills as well. So subscribe to the channel right now. There are links here and also in the description. Hola! ¿Cómo estás? If you've ever looked at Spanish before, you will have noticed these little iconic upside down exclamation mark things. Same with the question mark. This is a cool feature of Spanish punctuation. It's not hard. There's nothing difficult about this. It's just unique, although it looks a bit weird at first sight. This helps you understand what is going on in written Spanish, and it's actually quite handy when you think about it because it shows you exactly where the question part of the sentence or the exclamation part of the sentence actually starts. It's kind of a neat little trick. Why can't English do this, Rit? You're even allowed to use up to 3 exclamation marks to get your very emotional point across, but is that 3 or is it actually 6? If you speak Spanish, what do you think the hardest thing about Spanish is? Let me know in the comments. English is kind of boring when it comes to verbs. I spoke, you spoke, he spoke, we spoke, they spoke. But in Spanish, that verb is going to change depending on who's doing the speaking and what time frame it's happening in. And there's no doubt that conjugating verbs is probably the biggest thing that us English speakers have to grapple with when learning Spanish. There is a bit of memorization involved for sure, but just like with the grammar that we were talking about earlier, the best way to get used to verb conjugations is the same. It's by spending lots of time with content. That means going to YouTube channels like StoryLearning Spanish, reading books of simple stories. Volume 2 is actually now out as well. You can find that on Amazon. Anything that shows you those verbs in their natural state, not just memorizing rules in a boring old grammar book. Now, can you say civilizaciones? Well, in Latin America, Andalusia, in the south of Spain, and the Canary Islands, the letters C and Z are pronounced like a S, as in zapato, cerveza, civilizaciones, lots of S sounds. Meanwhile, in the rest of Spain, we get zapato, cerveza, that th sound that you have probably heard somewhere. It's written exactly the same, it's pronounced differently. So these sounds in Spanish are kind of malleable, and even Spanish speakers make spelling mistakes for that exact same reason. Again, people learning Spanish tend to get freaked out by this. And, I couldn't possibly listen to any content from Spain because I'm learning Mexican Spanish, and it doesn't matter. It's the same word, it's just pronounced a bit differently. But if you're curious why that th sound actually exists, it's quite an interesting story exactly, all in this video. So, Spanish, hard to learn or not? Well, according to the Foreign Service Institute, you could be speaking Spanish in just 24 weeks. Okay, this singing might take a little longer, but consider this. Spanish is spoken by nearly 450 million people, and there is so much incredible content available to watch, read, and listen to that however hard Spanish may or may not be, you've at least got tons to work with. And if you're looking for an easy way to get started learning Spanish, then a good place to start would be with our Spanish programs here at StoryLearning. We have courses for complete beginners all the way up to advanced, and of course, you'll be learning through the power of story. So it's a lot of fun. Links to check that out are in the description.